Recently, we've seen the U.S. since the year 2000, especially since 9/11 and the Patriot Act. We've seen the U.S. government's, the country, the score on economic freedom just absolutely plunging. And most of this is due to regulation that has been imposed on us by the government. And throughout the world and throughout history, you see that the freer a society is and that the less government there is, the more successful that society is, as long as they recognize property rights and they have a strong rule of law. So tell me your thoughts on where we're headed in the future with regulation and so on, and you talked about prosperity in free markets now when you were talking about gold.
Yeah, you know, as if the dollar didn't have enough trouble, the government just made dollars even less desirable by increasing the regulatory burden on everybody around the world that transacts in dollars with, you know, FACTA now and the Patriot Act and all these anti-money laundering laws. It is very difficult now globally to bank and transact in U.S. dollars, and companies that do so subject themselves to onerous fines if they, you know, do something wrong or if something slips through the cracks, and so it's really very, you know, self-destructive what we've done. We've basically hastened the demise of our own currency because now we've given people additional reasons to want to circumvent the dollar. And that's what's going on now. You're seeing that in Russia, you're seeing that in China, you're seeing that around the world as people try to move away from dollar-denominated trade because the government is making it so difficult. And that's how arrogant we actually are, because we don't realize how dependent we are on the rest of the world using our currency. We're actually taking advantage of this unique privilege that we have by actually biting the hands that feed us and expecting those hands to keep feeding us. Well, they're not going to.
Right, but we're also, at the same time, we're making it harder for somebody to start a new business here. We're making it harder for anybody that's in business to stay in business with the amount of regulation and
that's
taxation.
A whole different conversation. But sure, I mean, the regulatory burden is enormous. The cost of doing business, the war against employers, with, you know, all the punishments and penalties. You know, we've loaded up so many mandates because politicians, you know, they go where the votes are, right? That's where Willie Sutton, you know, why do you rob banks? That's where the money is, right? Well, the money to politicians are the votes. And there's a lot more people that want jobs than create them, right? You have more employees than employers. So all the laws favor the employee to the point that nobody can afford to employ people anymore because it's so expensive and there's so many risks. There's so many ways you can be sued by employees. And so people don't want employees. And yes, I mean, entrepreneurship is at generational lows right now in the United States. Yes, you hear the stories of somebody that starts a social media company and they become a billionaire. But those are, you know, those are the rare exceptions.
Right.
Most young people can't afford to start businesses. They're loaded up with college debt. You know, our bright kids are too broke to invest any time in starting a business. And the barriers to entry now are so high. In fact, the only reason these kids can make money on these web companies is because they don't have to make a profit. You know, they're coming up with a product that they can sell even though they lose money because Wall Street is able to fabricate some kind of story, and investors are able to profit even though companies themselves aren't profitable. But entrepreneurship is sagging, and you know, people are leaving the United States. So much so that, you know, the government keeps increasing the cost of renouncing your citizenship. You know, the forms are now getting very expensive as people are trying to, you know, look for better opportunities outside the United States. And I think that trend is only going to continue, unfortunately.
I agree. I think it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better, especially as an entire generation of broke people that did not save for retirement. The majority of the baby boomers, when they get to the point, you know, they're going to have to work a lot longer than previous generations that did save. And the Federal Reserve has made sure that they can't save, that they have to spend and speculate. And they punish them for saving, so they haven't saved anything because of the Fed. But when they get old and sick, so they can no longer work, then they're going to vote for the government to take care of them. They think the government is some separate benevolent entity that can just provide stuff instead of the government actually being us.
Yeah, I mean, I spoke about that earlier, where all the jobs that are being created in this country are for people in their 60s and 70s. These are people who wanted to be retired, but unfortunately find themselves back in the workforce because their savings are inadequate for the increasing cost of living. And so retirement is already, becoming a thing of the past. I mean, pretty soon it'll be like, the single, breadwinner household, where at one point in America, if a man had a job, his wife didn't need one, and he can afford to support a family. Now it's very rare. Most households, you need, 2 people working, and they can still barely make ends meet. But if you watch television shows from the 1950s and 1960s, you'll see the mom at home and the dad has a job. Well, pretty soon, what people will watch television, and they'll see older people not working. Hey, what's going on there? Why is he not working? Oh, he was retired. Oh, what's that? Right? Because it's not going to be part of the American experience, because we entrusted the government to take care of our retirement, and they destroyed it. That's the whatever the government sets out to do.
But as these people get old and sick, I think they're going to vote for more and more socialism.
Well, that's
the problem that I see.
That is the irony of big government, is that when government interferes in the economy and creates poverty, now they create more voters, because people then look to the government as their salvation, even though the government was the one that damned them to poverty in the first place. It's always, the government, they'll break your leg, and then they're the ones that hand you a crutch, and now you appreciate the crutch. And see, the government, without me, I wouldn't have this crutch. Well, without the government, you wouldn't need it, because you could still walk, because they're the ones that lamed you.
So the government comes along and they break another leg.
Right, and then see, you need us. Don't vote for the other guy. He's going to take away that crutch I just gave you.
Yeah. Now we're going to talk about what you can do to protect yourself in this environment. And Peter had some, we were talking about gold potentially basing here.
Well, I think it's been building this base now for a couple of years, and you'll notice, every time we get down below 1,200, people start saying, this is it, it's going to collapse, gold's going below 1,000.